Good afternoon and welcome back to the National Veterans Memorial Museum. I'm Justin Locke, a U.S. Army veteran, a paratrooper, and a senior parachutist. Today joins me Lieutenant General Michael Ferreter, U.S. Army retired, the NBMM's president and CEO, as well as Colonel Bill Butler, Army retired, who is the chief of staff here at the NBMM. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today.
Our pleasure.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
So today we just wanted to discuss, as it is August 16th, the National Airborne Day. So August 16th, back in 1940, was when the first jump occurred at Fort Benning, Georgia, which actually commemorated the idea of airborne within the United States military. So this conceptual idea of inserting U.S. troops behind enemy lines and attacking from the front there. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll dive right in. So Colonel Butler, you have some experience with the 173rd. If you wanted to dive in on that and how it shaped your career.
Yeah, there's no better organizations to be in than in airborne and ranger units because they're not only do they have to volunteer to be in the military, but they have to volunteer to be assigned to airborne and ranger units, and they go through a more exacting training and a more difficult, training pipeline just to be a member of the unit. And so everybody is just a little bit more professional, a little bit more trained, and has a little bit more determination to be the best versions of themselves and to be good teammates and great, infantrymen or artillerymen, logisticians, signalers, whatever their branch is, to support one another out on the battlefield.
Thank you. So back in World War II, we had the 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Division. Now the 82nd is still around out of North Carolina there, and the 101st has moved more towards an air assault mission. But also nowadays we expanded that reach into 4th Brigade, 25th Infantry Division out in Alaska there. Sir, for General Ferreter, I know you served out in Alaska. What was your experience out there?
I served I commanded Charlie Company Airborne of the 6th Battalion, 327th Infantry. And so the 327th took their lineage out of the 101st, but in those days, in 1984-85, they had a separate airborne company in each of the battalions, and I commanded the Charlie Company. And to Colonel Butler's initial point, there's just something special about paratroopers and something special about Rangers. And basically, if you find someone who's willing to jump out of an airplane, then you found someone who's willing to get in a fight for you. That's who these men and women are today. So we were north of the Arctic Range in Fairbanks, Alaska, where about 270 days a year at 10 below zero, parachuting with snowshoes, occasionally skis, and living to survive in the Arctic and then to thrive is a part of it. We jumped every month, twice a month, or 3 times a month, but at least twice a month. We would carry those heavy loads, 6, 8, 10, 12 miles to a pickup point or to a simulated battle. And it was amazing, Justin, because you'd see these young soldiers, young paratroopers come in, and they'd be, 135 pounds with somewhat shaved head and big ears and the skinny neck. And after one winter in the Uke, they say in the Yukon, 1 year of being a paratrooper anywhere that you serve, it makes men out of boys, and they thicken, and they're tough, and they're smart, and because when the light turns green, you go out of the airplane. When you need something done and you say, let's get it done, they go. It's in the culture just to go after it. Best soldiers in the world, both in Charlie Airborne as well as in the Ranger battalions in the 82nd, where I served, in 18th Airborne Corps. But one thing in common is that they overcame what should be a natural fear of leaving an airplane that's going 125 miles an hour and 1,000 to 1,500 feet, and trusting in your equipment, your training, and your leaders and your friends. but what I wanted to share with you, Justin, is here in my office, I've got this picture, and maybe we'll show it one way or another, but this is my father and General Gavin, who was the division commander of the 82nd during World War II. And my father's working for him, and at that point, Lieutenant Colonel Ferreter. And General Gavin says, hey, Ferreter, you're pretty squared away. You served in World War II in the Pacific. You have a Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, a couple Bronze Stars of Valor, and 2 Purple Hearts, but you don't have any airborne wings. You don't measure up yet. So then from Germany in 1954, he sent my dad to airborne school. And so I grew up in the house of a paratrooper. My dad was the oldest guy in his class, and talk about the black hats, smoking them and getting after them, knowing that he was lieutenant colonel then. They did. And then I went to airborne school, and Bill can say the same thing I'm about to say. And then my son Dan went to airborne school, and then my son Patty went to airborne school, and then my daughter Mary Whitney went to airborne school. And so it's so often in our, military and veteran families, you see this. And Margie's dad was 101st parachutist and master blaster, and as are 3 of the cousins of the family. So often it becomes a rites of passage, prove that you can measure up to the family's spirit, and challenge yourself to see just what can you do when things are really hard. So for me to go at the time when I went, I wasn't as nostalgic as I am probably today about it, but I knew it was supposed to be challenging. I trained really hard for it, and was ready for it, and did fine with all the long runs and the hot runs and the flutter kicks and the worm pit and the showers, but also was able to parachute with 2 of my 3 when they went to jump school. And I know, Bill, why don't you pitch in and talk about Will just a little bit too?
Yeah, yes, sir. So thank you. I grew up, and my dad was in the Special Forces in the reserves as a kid. So he would, I remember in the 1st or 2nd grade going out and seeing my first jump, and that's where I got bit by the I might want to be in the Army bug. And my great uncle on my dad's side had been in the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment in World War II and made all of the combat parachute assaults with the 503rd in the Pacific. And then you fast forward to 2008, and I ended up commanding 2nd Battalion 503rd Infantry in Italy and then Afghanistan. So it's kind of a legacy, like General Ferreter said, and it turns into a family business. And then my son is a West Point graduate, and he had gone to airborne school and graduated in October of 2019. So, kind of that legacy of, my great uncle, my dad, my father-in-law is also a senior parachutist, and was in the 101st in Vietnam when they were still an airborne unit before they transitioned to air mobile and air assault. His wife is also a parachutist, having attended airborne school, me, and then now our son is in the 82nd Airborne Division as a rifle platoon leader.
Oh, hey, Justin, I wanted to say, I went to airborne school. They were the best non-commissioned officers I had ever seen. And so I hadn't seen a lot. I'm a cadet at the Citadel, but the best non-commissioned officer of the 4 services where we had NCOs in ROTC was a Special Forces NCO named Master Sergeant Wheeler. Amazing. And then I went to ROTC summer camp at Fort Bragg, and there was just a saltiness, a grittiness. And as a cadet, I had to walk across, some quad somewhere, and 2nd Battalion 504th were doing a layout after coming out of the field of their gear, them checking us out to see if we'd ever be good enough to measure up to be an officer who would be in charge of them. And like Bill, many years later, I ended up commanding 2nd Battalion 504th. But it was just the professionalism, but also the no kidding, just a grittiness of the leadership. They weren't pudgy. They they were just business. And so I think that's the legacy of the Airborne for our guests listening in, is everyone knows that they do as advertised.
Back at Airborne School, what was your first jump like? What was going through your mind that you're in this aircraft ready to jump out, no idea what's going on? But then how does that also compare to your last jump? You know, what was your mindset then?
Yeah, well, my first one was I was with 4 of my classmates from the Citadel, and I was paying attention and all this stuff, and 2 of them fell asleep. And I thought, how on God's earth can you fall asleep? We're about 12 minutes from jumping out of the airplane. The first jump was just, you know, just a rush, just completely, the wind's blowing, it's loud and all that. Hit the ground, everything's okay. And then you realize, I got to do that 4 more times. That's when the reality hit me. And so the last jump, I'll tell you what, Bill, you go ahead and talk about your first, and then I'll come back and talk about my last, and then your last.
Yeah, yes, sir. So first jump, you know, it's August or end of July at Fort Benning, Georgia. It's hot and humid as all get out. I just remember getting in the aircraft and the smell of the JP8 and the backwash from the propellers, and it's just hot and miserable, and you're sitting on there, and they, you know, threaten you within an inch of your life if you touch any piece of your equipment, you know, airborne, you know, you're gonna pay for it, type of thing. And so you got the fear of God struck into you not to touch your equipment, but you're hot and sweaty and miserable, and then you start getting sleepy, and the aircraft is kind of vibrating, waiting to take off. And I was one of those guys that, you know, fell asleep. And, you know, kind of like in Ranger School, you're either a hungry Ranger or a sleepy Ranger. I was always the sleepy Ranger. And so fall asleep, you know, get shaken up, and, you know, they start doing the jump master, you know, preparation to get everybody up and inspect equipment and go through there, out the door and everything. And I remember landing. It was uneventful. It was a good landing. You know, walking the drop zone, it's hot, muggy, you know, miserable, and I had undone my chin strap. So I'm, you know, running across the DZ with my kit on and my chin strap hanging down, and I got scuffed up by the black hats, you know, before I got to the parachute turn-in point, and I corrected myself.
My last jump, I think it was about jump 208, and so I was fortunate to spend much of my 35-year career on what we call jump status. As a brigade commander, the Airborne School fell underneath me, and I didn't jump with them nearly as much. I jumped mostly with the 82nd Airborne and with 2nd Range Battalion and 3rd Range Battalion, and then Charlie Airborne up in Alaska. But I probably would have to think really hard to remember what it really was. But I, you know, I would always go through my mind, just try to see, you know, my wife's face, each of my 4 kids, their face, and if I could do that, cycle through, I go, okay, now I need to start thinking about the mission. And as you grow in responsibility or in command, you really have a lot to do for the mission, and the jump becomes the delivery to get there. And so you become less concerned about anything and more about, when I get on the ground, get the radios up, you know, find the RTOs, you know, pull security, get my chutes squared away, and get moving. But I ended up, after a lot of jumps, with really good ankles and really good feet and really good knees and really good hips. So for some reason or another, I was blessed to not get hurt. I got a lot of tree landings, a lot of roofs of barns, and on top of a 53, one time run across the wings of a C-141. But, you know, this side of the fence and that into swamps. I used to say, due to superior parachuting ability, I've walked away from another one.
Excellence there. Colonel Butler, your last jump?
So my last jump, I was a deputy commandant of the infantry school. Oh. And so I think at the time I was the commandant had left. He'd gotten picked up for division command, so I was the acting commandant, I guess. And so I, would go down to the airborne school, and at the time there were some training accidents and fatalities, and the infantry school had oversight of the airborne school, so we would jump just to ensure proficiency and familiarity in case there were investigations that we could provide some level of oversight. And so the last jump was I had one of our friends from a previous assignment. One of their kids was second grade, and they had the Flat Stanley. So I had Flat Stanley with me. Had some pictures taken with some of the young, airborne school students, primarily just to kind of add some levity to the stress that they were going through as, this is like their first or second jump. And some of the NCOs from my previous assignments and the 173rd Airborne Brigade were Black Hats. So it was kind of like a, mini reunion, so to speak, catch up and chew the fat with some, steely-eyed, barrel-chested freedom fighters before the jump. And then, it wasn't like being an airborne school student. You didn't get threatened with when you touch your equipment. So it was, much more civilized. But then sitting in the aircraft, I was sitting, they would normally put the strap hangers first at the door. And the young man I was sitting next to, it was his second jump, and his leg was shaking, and it wasn't just the, up and down shaking that people do because they're fidgety. It was shaking because he was really, really scared. So just kind of talked to him and told him not to worry. This is my 79th jump, no injuries. It's too easy. Just, fall back on your training, feet and knees together, relax, don't reach for the ground. And, I felt that, it was my duty to help him have a better jump just by, demonstrating calm and, confidence that I had from my previous experience.
Our paratroopers are some of the best in the world, the elite fighting force, and that's across the, not just the United States Army, but you see it across the world. Others strive to have their airborne programs up and running in comparison to ours. So what I wanted to see is what you would say now, knowing what you know now, what you would say to young paratroopers, those looking to go to airborne school, or even on the civilian side, those trying to get that mentality of leadership and proficiency. Bill, let's start with you.
So I would say if you want a challenge, join a selective organization, whether it's an airborne unit or the Rangers, because not everybody measures up to the standard, and it will make you're kind of a small fish in a big pond, so to speak, because you get a lot of people that all are driven and have goals and want to succeed and want to be the best that they can be in those types of units. So it only makes you better. And it's not a, uber competitive where people are stabbing each other in the back, but they're measuring themselves up to one another, but they're measuring themselves up to whatever the unit, organizational, or Army standard is. So if you want to be around really good leaders, then go to those kinds of units, and you'll see some great examples of leadership.
Great, thank you. General Faraday?
I think the unique nature of those units, airborne units and Ranger units, is that everyone has to be able to do what you do. And that's why when a light fighter or a paratrooper or Ranger goes to other units, there can be often much more distance in terms of camaraderie, in terms of trust between the officers and the NCOs and the privates. But everyone's going out the door. Everyone's carrying their ruck when you hit the ground. Everyone's caring for each other. There's a tight bond there. Now, I would say for the larger audience, because of Iraq and Afghanistan, the Army grew closer and closer together, and many leaders in one tribe of light infantry and airborne infantry and mechanized infantry, striker and armor, they all got to know each other. And so the 26 06, 07, 08, 09, I think the Army and those tribes shared the best of all of them. But in the end of the day, so I'm going to volunteer to get out of mom's basement. We got to make it through basic training and AIT. I got to volunteer to go through the rigorous training that demands, physically and over time, day after day after day for a 3-week period, that they can show up and do as advertised, and then live a super highly disciplined life to stay in those units, or get kicked out and sent to someplace where they can't perform with everyone. And then to have leaders to follow. So the NCOs you met when you were a private, or the NCOs that I met when I hit Charlie Airborne, they'll teach you and make you in their image. So, and then I think, we can do that in business. We can create those cultures in business, and it's the fact that we're mindful towards training and developing people and working towards high standards and thanking people when they do a great job, and making the corrections in a generally private fashion, or teaching them, so that I think that's what we take away. That's what veterans bring to business, is the leadership factory that we've all gone through, and that's what, looking back on it, those are my takeaways.
Excellent.
If I could just add too, you go to an airborne unit, and the young paratroopers expect you to be an excellent leader, and they challenge you every day. And it might be at the rifle range, they are busting your chops and saying that they're going to outshoot you, or there's a race to be the first one back to the assembly area after a night jump with combat equipment, or you're at the gym doing PT, and then they challenge you to pull-up contest or combatives, and hey sir, I bet I can choke you out. Oh no, you can't, type of thing. So not only do you have good leaders, but you have young men and women who demand good leaders lead them and have high expectations, and it makes you better. Every 2 years is an event down at Fort Benning, Georgia, called Ranger Rendezvous, and it's associated with the 75th Ranger Regiment's change of command. So when the regimental commander changes command. Now, the Ranger Regiment has got 5 battalions, 3 of which are located at Fort Benning, but then there's a West Coast battalion at Fort Lewis, Washington, and then another battalion, 1st Ranger Battalion, is at Hunter Army Airfield right outside of Savannah, Georgia. So they're geographically separated. And then for the last 20 years, since October of 2001, the Ranger Regiment has been continuously deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Syria and other places. So this is the first time since July of 2001 that every battalion in the regiment and the Rangers have been at Fort Benning on the parade field for the change of command, which is just amazing. So one of the aspects of the Ranger Rendezvous is the Ranger Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So the Ranger Hall of Fame was started in 1992 to recognize, at the time, those men who went above and beyond their service in Ranger units dating back to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, to the modern day Ranger battalions that we have now, to recognize them for excellence. And it could be excellence in combat, excellence in training, but they have demonstrated, above and beyond that they are, the best of the best. So I think they've got just over 200 men that have been inducted into the Ranger Hall of Fame. And then we went down for this a couple of weeks ago at Fort Benning to the class of 2021 induction ceremony. And in it was Lieutenant General Ferreter to be inducted in the 2021 class.
Well, first, congratulations, sir. It's an honor to have you inducted. What does it mean to you to be inducted, though, into this Ranger Hall of Fame?
Well, it's obviously very humbling. Even this conversation is not necessarily all that comfortable, because I've always tried to lead the way that people teach us to lead, and it's not about us. And I joked about day 3 of Ranger School. I thought maybe this isn't for me. This is getting kind of hard, and maybe I should stick it out. It means a lot of things. It turns out that when I graduated from the basic course as a lieutenant, I wasn't allowed to go to Ranger School. So I did my first tour of duty at Fort Riley, Kansas as a non-Ranger. And so then, and got told that I was a lesser being, a lesser soldier, lesser leader. And so I think, I'd always want to shift the focus to say, we can do anything. If you don't quit, it's not over. And if you're doing combatives and you don't quit, they'll wake you up. They choke you out. Don't worry about it. But don't tap out. And so, a non-Ranger officer ends up serving commanding Charlie Airborne, mostly because I went to Ranger School as a captain and arrived as a captain with a Ranger tab, and then serving in 2nd Ranger Battalion and commanding Bravo Company, 275 Rangers, and then being the S3 LNO of 3rd Ranger Battalion and being with the follow-on company into Mogadishu, Alpha Company, after Bravo fought there, and then coming back and commanded an Airborne Battalion in 82nd, and then commanding 3rd Ranger Battalion as Lieutenant Colonel, and then commanding the Airborne School, and then commanding Fort Benning. And all of that, if you do the math, if you look at the odds of that, that's impossible. There's no way that could have happened. But it happened because all of the Rangers and paratroopers who never let me down, and in fact carried me on their shoulders and carried our unit to success. And it happened because of their families who supported them, and it happened because I was smart enough to ask them, what do you think is the best way to do this, and how can we do that, or wouldn't it be great if we tried this? When I was sitting on the stage and they're reading everyone's bio, and knowing, because I was there in '92 when we did the first ceremony with then Colonel Dave Grange being the one who thought this through and started it. It was one of those, it seems like this isn't really happening, and I'm, do they know that they invited me up here? Because I'm really humbled by the large presence of those who've gone before me.
Of course, sir. Yes. So how did it feel to go back to Fort Benning, though, for this induction ceremony?
Well, Columbus is my home, and that's Columbus, Ohio, and Columbus, Georgia. And been almost every year since 1977, I've had boots on the ground in Columbus, Georgia. And my father was an infantryman, was a private, and did basic training there, went to OCS there, went to the officers' courses there, and he actually passed away there at Fort Benning while visiting us after a full life of awesomeness. And then we raised our kids there. We got to make our best friends in the world there. Had some of the best and the worst jumps ever there. And but it always feels as if we've come home when you go to the home of the infantry, the home of maneuver, the home of the cavalry, home of the airborne, home of the armor. It's where the eternal flame of warrior ethos burns, and it the minute you get on there. You can tell you're back at a place where everyone else in the world tries to be like the soldiers at Fort Benning.
So I always look back, and our most recent Medal of Honor recipient is a gentleman by the name of Colonel Ralph Puckett. The first time I went to Fort Benning was 1988, and then I went to Ranger School the following summer in 1989. And then the following summer, I was assigned there for the infantry officer basic course. And I remember meeting Colonel Puckett in the summer of 1990. And then he was just an institution at Fort Benning and still lives there today. And he's 94. And when I went back for assignments at 3rd Ranger Battalion as a lieutenant and then as a captain, he was the honorary colonel of the regiment. And I remember as a lieutenant, hearing him give a officer professional development presentation, and in it, the quote that stuck with me from him was, "Good enough is not good enough unless it's the best you can do." And I had kind of seared into my mind. So I carried that with me when I became a company commander in Hawaii, and then when I became a company commander in 3rd Ranger Battalion and battalion commander and the rest of my career. And I remember Colonel Puckett just demonstrating leadership. And he, at the time, he had been in his late 70s, but I was a Alpha Company commander, and we were doing a breach of a mind wire obstacle objective. It was an air assault, so we had Task Force 160 in support, and we land outside of the objective, set up the support by fire positions, maneuver to the breach, set up the local support by fire. Ranger demo team sets up the Bangalore torpedo, and this is in the middle of the night, so there's mortars being shot, there's helicopter gunships shooting on the objective and beyond the objective. It's loud, it's dark, everybody's got knots on, and I hear Colonel Puckett. I sense somebody next to me, not one of my guys, and then I hear Colonel Puckett talk, and he's got a very distinctive Southern gentleman accent, and he said, "Bill, how's it going?" And I knew who it was. I looked over. I said, "Oh, sir, what are you doing here?" He's like, "I'm just observing training." And next thing I know, I hear the demo team yell, "Fire in the hole! Fire in the hole! Fire in the hole!" Said, "Sir, get your head down." He said, "I got it." And boom, dust and smoke, and he gets up before me and runs through the breach with the lead team on the assault element. And you can't make this stuff up. You have this warrior in his mid to late 70s just demonstrating great leadership. And so I guess that's what I would tell future generations of the Army is you've got some great leaders, and you may not know it, but just watch and you'll see them come out.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for both joining me today on National Airborne Day. It's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing your experiences about the airborne. So we also invite you at home just to follow along with us and thank a paratrooper. So utilize hashtag National Airborne Day on all your social media channels, and have a good day. Airborne all the way.
All the way.
All the way.